that around the country from where you are attending this meeting, you are all safe. Right now, as I speak, Chennai is going through a cyclone, and it's a very severe cyclone. And hopefully, there will be no major power cuts or disruptions. And I hope that this lecture will go through smoothly. So do pray for Chennai, that we don't go through a very difficult time. Thank you very much for having me on the program for the second time. And today we are going to talk about creativity for academic leadership. Like leadership in any other field or arena, academic leadership is also being constantly challenged. We are living in disruptive times. We are living in times where there's been no paradigm like this before. So therefore, we are being asked very difficult questions for which we do not have ready-made answers. So therefore, the leadership that is required in the academic arena needs to be very creative. And that is one of the reasons why this topic was chosen. And I'm sure you're all academic leaders in your own way, maybe not at the very top of the organization, but in your own way, you must be leading smaller or bigger teams. And often you are also challenged in leading people, in influencing them, in inspiring them. There are always challenges. So this topic, in my opinion, is a very apt one for today's world. But before I begin today's topic, I want to make one thing very clear. This lecture or this session is not about improving your creativity. No, this lecture is not about individual creativity improvement. Probably another occasion, another time would be apt for it. What is this particular session about? I want to clarify that at the very beginning. This session is about creating an ambience, a sort of a groundwork, so that our teams also become creative. Because a creative leader is only a limited option. A creative leader can maximum only be individually creative. But when we talk about creative leadership, we are talking about that creativity of the leader being transferred to his followers also. And so therefore, we find that when the leader along with his team is creative, then the solutions provided are far more comprehensive and more long lasting and are also very satisfying. So for that reason, let us not confuse this session as a creativity session. I repeat again, this is about creating the ground conditions, the ambience that is required for a team to become creative. Now, the process of creating this ambience and this groundwork is not very exciting, but it is very essential. So for that reason, we need to go through this session. But before I start sharing the slides, I can tell you the program for today. What I hope to do is for about 60-65 minutes, I want to share my slides and discuss with you. What I missed out on the first session because of various interruptions was that I did not have a thorough question and answer session. So I would encourage you, as you go through this presentation, you can raise questions in the chat box. And once my lecture is over, I wish to come back to those questions. So now let me start sharing my slide. Can I have the share option? Organizers, can I have the share option?
Sure, sir. Sure. Harishree, can you please enable sir as presenter?
Yes, sir, it is done.
Yeah, it is done now. Okay, thank you very much. Now we are on. So the topic, as I have talked about, is the creativity for academic leadership. And I've also briefly mentioned the context in which this particular session is taking place. And I hope this will serve the purpose of making you into more creative leaders in the academic environment. And of course, I am Dr. David Jawahar. I've been already introduced to you. Now, what does leadership mean to, generally when this question is asked, what does leadership mean to people? There are only three possible answers that immediately come to our mind. One, a political leader. That is something that we are very familiar with. And a country like India, we have had very big political leaders. So can I request that somebody mute your phone, your mic, please? Can you mute it, please? Thank you. So the first thing that comes to our mind about when we use the word leader or leadership is that we are often reminded of political leaders, starting from Mahatma Gandhi, Jawahar Nehru, and so on to our present leaders. There are plenty of examples, and these are the ones who immediately come to our mind. Or we are reminded of pioneers, people who broke ground, who broke the ground rules of that time period and did something very pioneering, whether it is in science or whether it is in social life or whatever it is. But sometimes, we are also reminded of headships. The head of an organization, whether you call them as a CEO or whether you call them as the principal of a school or you call them as the director of a college, it does not matter. These are possibly some of the images that come to our mind when we use the word leadership. Now, they are not very different. All three of them more or less do the same thing. What do they do? Whether you're a political leader, whether you're a pioneer, or whether you're a headship, we find that all leaders have the ability to influence a group towards the achievement of a vision or a set of goals. Now, the word to be focused on here is about influence. Now, we imagine that a leader is able to influence people throughout his career or throughout his time period. But we know even political leaders shine for a moment, for a time period, and then they are defeated, then they are lost. Then we move on to somebody else. Pioneers are also remembered for their contributions, and then we move on. But we are talking about sustainable influence over a time period, over a group of people. And the purpose of this influence is to achieve a particular vision or a set of goals. Now, if not for this influence, if not for this particular influence, that group may not be able to achieve that vision or the set of goals. It's a very simple proposition. So leadership is the enabling factor that makes it possible for that group to move forward and achieve a set of goals or a vision that they have created for themselves. Okay, having said that, let's move on. What is the relationship between creativity and leadership? Now, there are some interesting things that I wanted to share with you. In 2010, IBM surveyed some 1,500 corporate heads and public sector leaders. And they wanted to know what drives them in managing their companies in today's world. What is the one single ability that they needed to be very effective leaders was a question posed before them. Of course, it's about 10 years ago, but the situation has not changed much to this day. Now, they found something very interesting. Now, what makes it more interesting is the comparison that is made. They found that creativity was ranked the most important leadership quality. That was very surprising because it was a winner over two other important things. Until that point, people believed that leaders needed to have a global outlook and they needed to look at the larger picture and must have a global thinking perspective. And they also said that leaders must be impeccable and they must have integrity, which is unquestionable. But this survey revealed that while integrity and global thinking was still important, what was far more important was for the leader to exhibit creativity in the workplace. That was an amazing finding because we have always looked at leaders as people who encourage leadership in others or who appreciate leadership, etc., etc. But leadership as the fountainhead of creativity was for the first time pointed out to these people. Now, creativity is one of the most important characteristics of an effective leader. There are leaders and there are leaders. And even in the effectiveness, you have a spectrum of most effective, least effective, and so on. But we find with the very effective leaders, one of the important characteristics of the leaders is the amount of creativity that they are able to bring into the workplace, and more importantly, the amount of creativity that they are able to pass on to their followers. And that is why the second part of the statement reads, and fosters a successful and healthy workplace environment. Because you see, the process of creativity does not happen by accident, or it does not happen by mistake. Though we are told stories of how a scientist sat below an apple tree, and when the apple fell on Newton, he discovered gravity. It's not about the apple tree, or it is about the apple falling on his head. It was about all that went before the apple fell on his head, and all the thinking process that was already in his mind. And then when the apple fell on his head, the aha moment came about. So therefore, creativity is about the preparation that a leader has to bring into the workplace. Many leaders keep talking and telling their followers, I want you to be creative. I want you to be innovative. I want you to do wonderful things. We have space for it and all that. Forgetting that there is a methodology that is required for a leader to infuse creativity into the workplace environment. We are going to talk about that today. And academic leadership is no different. Look at all the challenges facing us today. We are so used, if you look at the way that our syllabus is framed, that our curriculum is designed, it is all designed and it is all made so that we have face-to-face classes. And then we were asked to move online. But you know what the biggest problem is? The biggest problem is not the technology. It is not the online classes, but the conversion of a syllabus or a curriculum that was 100% meant for face-to-face communication has been changed into a 100% non-face-to-face communication. That is a tremendous challenge. And many of us have done extremely well. Of course, some of us are still struggling. This is not the only academic leadership challenge that we are facing. We are facing competition. We are facing government legislations. We are facing so many other issues. For all of these, we need answers. And these answers are not ready-made, and these answers are not easy to get. And that is why creativity for a leader is such an essential issue. Now, what are the possible advantages when a leader is creative? Well, let's understand that first, and then we will go into the process. What could be the biggest advantages? Some of the advantages are listed out here. There are many advantages, but I have shortlisted 4 important things, especially from the academic leadership point of view, because I know I am addressing senior academicians. One of the things that we find, some of the things that we find in the workplace today is we are surrounded by problems for which we do not have answers. We want more quality teachers. We are not getting enough quality teachers. We want more publications in a shorter time period. We want our institutions to grow at a rapid pace where we do not have the infrastructure sometimes. So the problems that we face are amazingly large. And we want to achieve growth. And we want to achieve growth in a very, very short time period. Now, if you look at all of them, they have something in common. The problem solving, achieving growth, mentoring teams, or finding unlikely perspectives within the work environment is all brought about because of the times that we live in. We live in times that are very challenging. They are very, very challenging, not just for the corporate world. The corporate world is just another part of the ecosystem. And we are also part of the same ecosystem. And some of the problems faced by the corporates are also faced by us. If you look at the 4 of them, there's no difference. The corporates face the same problems, the same challenges, and we also face the same challenges. But let me take a minute on this. We need to grow. growing is a pain. Growing is a huge challenge for all of us. How do you grow? How fast do you grow? How do you know you have grown? What are the benchmarks that you have set for yourselves for growth? Who do you measure it against? What instruments do you measure for growth? And for that, we understand that we need teams to work with us, teams which are single minded like us, which see the same vision that we do. But unfortunately, we do not have such teams. And even if we create such teams, one of the greatest challenges in the academic world is attrition. There is a constant churning. So a team that was there 3 months ago is no longer there. There are a couple of new faces. There are a couple of holes, vacuum in the place of those people. So how do you mentor these teams in the workplace? And how do you take them forward? How do you make them believe? How do you inspire them? How do you influence them? Most importantly, we are going to keep looking for the same answers. If you ask the same questions time and again, we are only going to get the same answers. But we want new answers. But for new answers, you must ask new questions. And we find that one of the important challenges in academic world is that we discourage people asking new questions. We do not want our younger team members to have a different perspective. We immediately brand them as non-team members or rebels or people who are troublemakers. Unfortunately, the unlikely perspectives are the forerunners of asking different questions. And when we ask the questions differently, we get different answers, and that will take us forward. All of this is the advantage, some of the advantages of creative leadership. Now, this is the template that I'm going to use for today's discussion. This is made up of 9 important points. Now, I repeat, these 9 points is not directly about creativity, but it's about creating the ambience or the groundwork that will bring about creativity into the workplace, in your teams, in your institutions, in whatever activity that you do. It starts off with the first realization, it's not about your creativity. Oh, yes, you need to be creative. All academic leaders need to be creative. But more important, it is about your team's creativity that we are going to discuss in great detail today. Number 2, you also need to be creative, but more importantly, you should first of all understand what is the creativity process. The creativity process, I am afraid, is not a glamorous thing. It is not an exciting model. It is one about patience. It is one about perseverance. It is one about saying, I won't give up. And then it happens. We always look at creativity at the point at which it has incubated and think it is wonderful. But before that, the process is very painful and you have to be extremely patient in getting it to be done. So that is also something that we shall discuss today. Some other things that we shall talk about is how do we promote diversity? And we find that the most creative ideas come from the most diverse teams. Can we bring about diversity into our workplace? What could be the challenges which are stopping us from promoting diversity? How do you identify what is your strength, team's strengths and weaknesses? Because you can imagine anything that you want, but unless you know, and you know for sure what your team's strengths and weaknesses are, it would be impossible for you to set yourself realistic goals or even achieving it. How do we trust people? What are the reasons why trusting people in the modern environment is so difficult? How can we improve the trust quotient is another issue that we shall discuss today. And in this process, we must also be realistic enough to understand that despite our best intentions, despite our best preparation, despite all the resources at hand, from time to time, we will fail. And most organizations tend to sweep failures under the carpet. But instead, we need to embrace failure. And we need to say, this is an integral part of my growth plan. I know that I will fail, I anticipated that sometime I will fail. I will not be ashamed of the failure. How do I go about doing that? Encourage debate, because the more the debate, the more the new perspectives that will emerge. More the new perspectives that will emerge, the greater the chance that you will start asking the right question. It's not the right answer which is important. If you ask the right question, the right answer will automatically emerge. So encourage debate. Champion ideas. Very many times the ideas are good, but there's nobody to support it. Simply because somebody lower down the order has generated this idea, or somebody who's not liked by the people has brought out that idea. But it needs a champion to carry the idea through. That is also something that we shall talk about. And finally, how do we make all these ideas come true? Because it is at that point we have created a truly creative environment, a truly creative ground place. You know, they say a good plan to come up is not to be decided by the seed alone. The seed must find a fertile ground. Until the fertile ground is ready, the best of the seed will not bring about a plant. And I want to remind you, today we are going to talk about how do we make the soil fertile enough that when the most creative of the seed falls into it, how do we get that creative plant to come about? That is the focus of today's lecture, and we are going through. Let's start with the first one. It's not about your creativity. See, if it was only about your creativity, you wouldn't need a team. You would go being a Superman. You would go there and do wonders. You would change the world single-handedly. Literally, the Superman in you would finish off the job. But there is this realization that we need a team. And let us imagine for a moment, the most creative leader, but the most non-creative team. What combination is that? Of what use is the leader's creativity if the team does not catch up with the creativity quotient of the leader, right? So therefore, your creativity is important, but it is not about your own creativity. You need a team that is also equally creative. Now, I want you to be honest to yourself when you answer this 4 questions. Let your mind go back to the institutions in which you work. On a 1 to 10 scale, you mark yourself on these 4. You don't tell me the answers, but that should give you an idea about what sort of an environment in which you are working right now. Cultivate open communication. Team creativity is all about communication. Are people willing to talk? Is there open communication? Does all your meeting end in peace? When people talk, do they have a hidden agenda in whatever that they bring to the table? You find that cultivating open communication is not an easy task. It is a point at which people trust each other. And they say, I will openly speak my mind. Whether it is a criticism or it is an appreciation, I will speak about it. I will talk about my fears. I will talk about my apprehensions. I will talk about why this idea is not open to me. I don't care if this idea has been generated by the top person. I can still openly talk about communication and not fear about consequences. If that is a climate, then we are already on the way to being creative. Number 2, facilitate diverse ways of working, not just one style. Like many of you, I have always been in educational institutions, and I have been in some of the best institutions possible. But one thing that always makes me sad is that every institution has just one style of working. And that is probably the top man's style of working. And that top man's style of working is imagined to be the only way of working. And there we kill off creativity. Because you see, we as human beings are diverse. Now, if you look at our fingerprints, that should tell you a story. There's no one who has the fingerprints that you have. No one before you, no one after you. So what does that tell us? That though we are all human beings, The actual truth is that each one of us is a unique specimen. Each one of us is a unique specimen. And being a unique specimen, we've got to understand that there are more than one right way of doing a particular thing. Whether it is teaching, whether it is mentoring, whether it is evaluating a paper, whatever academic activity that we do, there is no one method. But we find increasingly in the academic arena, we are talking about standardization. Now, that is the one reason why we find that creativity, especially in the academic world, is being stifled because of this extreme demand for standardization. So facilitate diverse ways of thinking. So if somebody comes up with a different way of it, don't shoot it by saying, this is not my organization culture. We have never done it before. This is not okay with this. Do you think it will work? Don't kill the idea even before it germinates. Intentionally change things up. Avoid predictability. Another major reason why creativity dies is the predictability. Monday morning, okay, we're going to have a meeting. Friday evening, we're going to have a review. And through the day, I've got to do this, etc., etc., etc. There goes the excitement part of it. There goes the inspiration part of it because of predictability. Can you intentionally change things up? On a 1 to 10 scale, can you tell yourself, do you have the discretion to do that? Or have you ever done that even when you had the discretion? When was the last time that you intentionally changed things up? Hold guided brainstorming sessions. It is called guided brainstorming because brainstorming sometimes gets out of hand and it becomes a slanging match. People shout at each other, people scream at each other and whatnot, whatnot. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about guided brainstorming sessions where we will talk about that a little later in debates, where we will guide it in a particular direction so that each brainstorming session ends up with results, not just debates. The whole idea of debating is to generate alternatives. And if the alternatives are mutually exclusive, then there is no point in calling them as alternatives. You also need to be creative, but more importantly, we need to understand the creativity process. I'm going to talk about the creativity process now, and I'm sure many of you already know what is the creativity process, but still, let me take you through this. The creativity process is very important. It is actually made up of 4 stages. Now, again, I want to remind this August class, the set of learned people who are listening to my lecture. Creativity does not happen automatically. It does not happen suddenly, or it does not happen by a mistake. There is an actual process by which creativity happens. The only reason why we don't realize that there is a process is that sometimes this process is not very clearly noticed. But just because we have not noticed does not mean that the process does not exist. It exists, it is very much there, and the next time you come across a creative solution, look back and you will find that there was a process that led to this creation. Now, where does it start? It starts off with a preparation. Sometimes when people say, I was lucky, there is no such thing as luck. Preparedness meets an opportunity. And so also with the case with creativity is that it starts off with the preparation. You want the greatest of the creative ideas in the workplace. Where are your labs? Where are your laboratories? Where are your laptops? Where is the software? Where is the training program given to the teachers? What new conferences have they attended? It becomes absolutely important that one must prepare. If the preparation is not there, the soldier is not ready for the war. The soldier cannot start training when the war is upon them. So this preparation is about, if you look at the last line, it is going out into the world to gather the necessary data, resources, materials, and expertise. Sometimes, in the preparation stage, people feel a little bit jaded, or they feel, what is the purpose of all of this? Why are you asking us to do all of this? Because then they do not know the purpose of why we need this preparation. Because the preparation by itself does not lead to creativity. And so people can sometimes complain Sometimes when we ask people, if you are going to be promoted under the career advancement scheme, you must have attended 2 programs, or you must have undergone 2 summer schools or something like that. What they don't understand is that that is also a preparation for something much bigger to come in the days ahead. So we have got to understand that it all starts with a problem or an opportunity. When the problem or opportunity is presented before us, sometimes we jump straight into the answer. And that is also the reason why we fail, because there is no preparation. Now, for example, some X is the problem. Now, the first stage of solving that problem is to prepare. What are the issues that are facing us? And to answer these questions, what resources do we need? Is it in terms of knowledge? Is it in terms of physical resources? Is it in terms of expertise? What do we need? Bring all of them together into the organization in the first place. Creativity, I repeat, will not happen in an empty pan. There are many organizations digging into their empty pans and hoping that they will come up with an innovative solution. It's not coming. Sorry, it's not coming. Number 2 is the incubation part. Now, in the beginning of the lecture, I talked about patience, perseverance, and I talked to you about how you've got to keep on doing it. Now, this is the stage in which you have brought all those things together. The ideas and the information gathered in stage 1 marinate in the mind. This is like making pickles. You know how pickles are made. You cut up the mangoes, you put in the chili powder, you put in the salt. Yeah, of course, you can eat it the very next day or the same day. But you don't do that. You let it marinate. There is a process. Now, whether you're going to put in a mango or whether you're going to put in a lime or you're going to put in something else would all differ. Hello? I'll try to come back. Thank you. Sorry. So the incubation, it marinates in the mind. So it slowly simmers, and for each idea, there is a different incubation time period. The incubation time period varies from one individual to another. So, and the incubation also varies from one idea to another. This is like, hatching a chicken egg, hatching a ostrich egg, or the gestation period for a egg for an elephant is very different from the gestation period for a goat. So we find that all of these things can happen in different ways. So this incubation is a period of patience, and it is during this time period that you try to find connections between what seems to be unconnected dots. These are various patterns, and during this incubation period, you try to draw lines between these dots and try to make a picture. There is no ready-made answer for you that you can refer to and do it. Sometimes the process is frustrating because you draw all the lines and connect the dots, still it makes no sense. Then you rub out everything and then start from scratch. But this time the route is different. And then you try to connect the dots, and it takes time. And the process is also very slow and painful. But when this happens, you will find it is all worth the effort when it comes to stage 3. This is the aha moment. So when we talk about the scientist jumping up from his bathtub and saying, Eureka, I have found out. When Archimedes says that, I have found the answer, it was not him sitting in the bath, or as I said, it is not the case of Newton sitting under the apple tree. That's not what was the problem. The problem is something else very, very different. So therefore, the illumination stage at which you find the possible solution. I'm talking about something again very carefully. I'm calling it as the possible solution. I'm not saying this is the solution, but this is a solution. This is a solution, But for the solution to work, I've got to verify it. I've got to verify it under different circumstances. I've got to work it under different conditions to find out if this will actually work. Because you see, sometimes a brilliant idea turns into a solution, but it is not workable. It is not sustainable. And that is the verification stage at which, in the corporate world, we know it as the stage in which it is converted into a service or a product. It is turned into a service or a product, and then it happens very well. But this verification stage is the culmination of the creativity process. Now, what is the implication for a leader? The implication for the leader is staring us in the face. It talks about what do you do in the preparation stage? What support do you give in the incubation stage? How do you help when the illumination comes through? And how do you also support the verification stage? Now, a leader cannot be ignorant of these 4 stages and say, oh, creativity will happen by itself. No, creativity is never going to happen unless the leader himself knows. Once the leader knows these processes or the steps in this process and passes it on to his followers, it would be impossible to do it. Okay, the third thing that we want to talk about is how do we promote diversity? Now, I have already told you that diversity, especially in countries like India, is not very common. It's not very common. I don't know how many of you are aware, but India is made up of 3 races: the Aryans, the Dravidians, and the Mongolian descendants. So we have 3 different races. But it's not just about the races that I want to talk about here. When you can choose, and that is a very important question. Sometimes academic leaders are not given much of a choice. I agree. But when you can choose, when you're given the freedom, go for diversity. And what do I mean by diversity? Diversity means caste, community, race, culture, countries, age, sex, experience, qualifications, experience, knowledge, a whole lot of things. The more diverse your team, the more chances that you will get differing perspectives into the workplace. I repeat again, this is also a preparation. The more the diversity, the greater the chances that the spark will come through. And when does the spark come through? Only when there is friction, but it is healthy friction. If there is no diversity, there will be no spark. Everything will be so smooth. Everything will go through so quietly that nobody will notice that only time has passed and nothing new has ever emerged. Now, there is a role for the leaders, and the academic leaders also need to answer these questions. Leaders can ask themselves these 3 questions. How can I make all team leaders feel equally valued? You know, in most organizations, I know I'm going to talk. I know I'm going to talk about something which is a little bit sensitive. You know, I have worked in various organizations, and every time, you know, if it is the list of holidays that are given out, and usually the list of holidays is one place in which one group or the other is not happy. They would say, why have you not included that festival? Oh, we celebrate that festival. Why have you not included that? It's a very sensitive issue. But it is important to that individual. He feels that he is different. And because he is different, he believes that equal importance must also be given to him or her. And therefore, what can the team leader do to make them all feel equally valued? I was just talking about that one instead. Don't restrict your mind to only the holidays, not just the list of holidays. When people come from diverse backgrounds, sometimes some of them feel disadvantaged. You know, I've also felt that we have not properly answered the gender divide. We have not properly answered it. We find in many cases, though we have more women in the workplace, sometimes the way that we do treat them is not always right. They feel that they are disadvantaged. They believe that they are as important as anybody else, and yet we do not make them feel equally valued. Here is a question to all of us. If you're a team leader, are you doing enough to make others feel equally valued? Ask yourself that question. How can I facilitate collaboration between team members? Are there members who are pulling more than others? Are there ones who are idle? Are there others who are not contributing? Not because they don't want to contribute, but because they do not agree with the way that it is done. How can you bring about this collaboration between these team members who are diverse? They are not collaborating because they don't know the know-how, or they are not in agreement with what is going on. How do we make them become productive members or contributing members? Above all, leaders must also realize this question of diversity. People are looking at you. People are watching you all the time. Are you truly a leader who exhibits that he is actually promoting diversity? Or do people look at you and believe that you have nothing to do with diversity, that you are averse to diversity, and that you have never ever done anything for diversity? Because when they look at the leader, they learn a lesson and they take it home and they practice it and they bring it back to the workplace. So therefore, promoting diversity is another important ground rule for bringing about creativity. Identify your team's strengths and weaknesses. This is not an easy job. Agreed, it's not easy. The team's strength lies not only in winning or losing. We generally think that when a team has won, it's a strong team. And if it has lost, it's a weak team. No, strong teams also lose. And weak teams also win. So winning or losing cannot be a binary decision to decide on whether your team is strong or weak. Some of the important processes that you have to focus on is to eliminate the weaknesses and bring about the strengths in the organization. One, again, repeatedly we'll be talking about this. Open communication. How open, how free are people to communicate their ideas, their fears, their apprehensions, their reservations? Are people willing to bring it around? If a team does not communicate openly, you can take it as a weakness of the team. And sooner or later, it will have a reflection on what is creativity. Because creativity is based on pure logic, pure sense, and open communication. And if this does not happen, that is also not going to happen. Are people feeling proud about belonging to this group? If they are constantly referring to some other college, some other institution and saying, there they do it differently, there they have wonderful practices, there they do this, there we don't do that. If that is happening, those are giveaway telltale signs. That is a weakness. It means the team spirit and identity is missing. The greatest creativity comes from teams that believe in themselves, who believe that, yes, we are good enough. And if they do not believe that they are good enough, they cannot bring about that creativity into the workplace. Individual capabilities, skill sets, and working styles must be complementary. You see, if you look at a jigsaw puzzle, each piece by itself makes no sense. But when you put in the jigsaw puzzle pieces onto a larger picture and you start measuring it, then you will find what seems to be an odd piece actually fits into some other piece perfectly. And when you put in all of these, what seems to be unconnected pieces, they complement each other. Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are predictable, some of them are unpredictable. But the idea behind the strength of a team is, do they complement each other? So even in a cricket team, you cannot have all batsmen in a cricket team. You also need good fielders. You also need good bowlers. You also need a good strategist who will tell you how to place the field. Only then you win. And therefore, the individual capabilities, skill sets, and working styles, the most important question is, are they complementing each other? If they complement each other, that's fine. There must be open-mindedness and a new perspective acceptance. Ask yourself the question, whenever you meet and whenever a new idea is suggested, are more number of people opposing it or accepting it? My experience personally as a teacher and as an academic administrator, I find that every time a new idea is brought into the workplace, there are more people who oppose it. I don't blame the teachers or the academicians. The reason why they oppose it is because of fear. They believe that status quo will be challenged, that something that has been assured to them today will be taken away tomorrow from them. So therefore, the strength of a team is to be seen in how open-minded are they? Are they willing to challenge themselves? Tell them a new role, a new designation. From tomorrow, this is the new set of tasks. How do they look at it? The more the new perspective acceptance, you can call your team as a very strong team. But if they are going to put up defenses, go back to the working board and find out why are they challenging you. Find the last point is about leading and following. Encourage people to lead. When I was in the industry for a short time, I started off my career as executive assistant to the managing director of a large company. I was 23 years. And it was a very, very important task. And every Monday morning, we would have a meeting where the corporate advisor, the financial head, the marketing head, and everybody would sit. And I would be sitting there taking notes for the MD because I was his executive assistant. At one point of time, one fateful day, he called me by name and said, "You head the meeting." I was shell-shocked because the people there, their experience was more than my age. But it was at that point of time when my leader gave me the chance to lead that I really got to be a leader. Are you doing that in your workplace? Are you allowing people to lead? Or are you always saying, okay, let them lead, I will lead, the same old people will lead? But the leaders, the second part is more important. Not only is leading important, but do they also know how to follow? Make the leaders follow. When the leadership is on rotation, it is attempted in many academic institutions. They have what is known as headship by rotation. But that has become a comedy now. Headship by rotation is actually a comedy. So for 3 years, you put a donkey at the head of the institution. He sits there, and after 3 years, they know that after 3 years, this fellow will go. Then I will get my chance to get back at him. That is not leading and following. This is a mutual agreement by which people will understand that leading and following increases the team strength. So those are some things that I want you to keep in mind. Let's move on to the next one. Trust your people and build trust. We have to admit, why do we not trust people? Because the moment we trust people, people take advantage. Or the trust that we have been given, we give to them, is misused by them. So we don't trust these people. But an important adhesive that keeps the teams together and makes them work together is the trust quotient. How do we do that? Be honest and support your team. First of all, you be honest. And whenever a situation comes around, the first priority for a team leader is not to wash his hands off his team, but to support his team no matter what. Even if they are wrong, doesn't matter. Tell them that they are wrong, but tell them, I will back you up. I will be there to make sure that you will get a second chance. The more you do that, the more the team grows in confidence, and the more they are inspired to do better. Respond constructively to problems. Everybody brings in a problem. I have been a leader myself. And so when somebody brings in a problem, my first response sometimes is, oh my God, this man has come into my room. He must have brought a problem. Now, the reason why the problem has been brought to you is that they want you to answer it. They want that attention to them. And therefore, respond constructively to problems. Don't say, okay, we'll look at it tomorrow. Oh, okay, I'll ask one of my juniors to look at it. Okay, you put it in writing. Those are not constructively approaching or responding to problems. Responding constructively to problems is telling that, yes, there is a problem. Admit it first. Admit that there is a problem. And secondly, say, okay, together, let us find a solution. Because one of the games that people play is that they want you to find a solution. And when you find a solution, they'll say, what is wrong with the solution? So instead of doing that, say, together, let's find a solution. That is responding constructively to problems. Avoid. If you have delegated a task, let them do it. Even if it is wrong, it's okay. Let them bring it back to you, take a look at it, and tell them where they went wrong. But in your criticism, ensure that you're criticizing the work and not the person. And make sure the people also know the difference between the two. Don't micromanage. Where it is possible, only create policies, allow people to do their own. Model the behavior you want to see. You want people to be punctual? You be punctual. You want people to be well dressed? You be well dressed. You want people to mark the attendance? You mark the attendance first. I've seen this with academic leaders is that the biggest culprits are the academic leaders themselves. They have a separate set of rules for themselves, and they want their juniors or their subordinates to do something else. Try doing this so that your subordinates, when they look at you, they'll say, my leader does that. I cannot afford not to do it. I will do whatever he does and more than that. But we don't model the behavior we want to see. And sometimes the two are different. And the people say, the model is not viable because it's not a real model. My leader himself is not doing it. So why should I do it? Protect your employees under any cost. They are your team. Like a platoon leader in an army, you need to protect your employees. It doesn't mean that you will protect all their misdeeds or all their crimes. That's not protecting. That is, here we are talking about the genuine mistakes that employees do. Yes, in their attempt to do something different, in their attempt to do something creative, they may attempt something which has gone wrong. Look for the intention, not the outcome. The outcome can be very confusing to most leaders. Look for the intention. The intention must always be rewarded, not the outcome. So protect your employees. Keep your word. That's the biggest thing about trust. You know, even with children at home, what do we say? We say, I'll buy you a toy if you study well, or I'll take you to the cinemas if you do well. And then when we don't do it, that is the first stage in which parents lose the trust of the children because we have broken our word. You cannot afford to break your word. Before you give your word, think whether you can keep your word. If you even have a small doubt on whether you can keep your word, don't give your word. But should you say, if you all work and Saturday will be a holiday, make sure it's a holiday. Otherwise, they're not going to trust you. They'll think you're cheating them. They will think that you will say one thing and do another. Now, I want you to remember this. This is not some character building exercise we are doing. These are the fundamental steps for creating a creative environment. Competence uncompromised. Don't settle for anything less than the best. Make it a policy that your people understand. Then next time, they're not going to bring you half-baked projects. They're not going to bring you things which are only half done and say, sorry, sir, I was late, sir. They will never bring it. If you make it a policy, and if you also make it into a practice, that competence is uncompromised. And the only acceptance is that it will always be the best that is possible. Give teammates the benefit of doubt. You know, sometimes there is a gray area in which somebody says, I'm late for class, there was a traffic jam. Don't go to the Google and find out if there was a traffic jam on that particular route. Give teammates the benefit of doubt. It's a small doubt. It also tells them that, okay, my leader is magnanimous. My leader accepts small errors. But there is also the pricking of the conscience that so-and-so will not do it again. So give teammates the benefit of doubt. Finally, share necessary information. Don't tell them everything that is required. Sometimes the news is bad. You don't have to tell them all of that. But the news can change. What is negative news now may change shortly. So don't worry about that. Whatever information is necessary for them to start working and to keep working, Give it to them. Don't be stingy. Don't give it away in small portions. Whatever is necessary, give it to them. If it is not necessary, take a discretionary view of it and say, okay, I will give it to them when they pass on to the next stage. Embrace failure. This is probably the most difficult task possible. This is the most difficult task when you embrace failure. By embracing failure, I want you to read through this a little carefully. You are accepting yourself and your situation as a part of life. It is an opportunity for growth, and it is not a measure of your future or self-worth. While some things are out of your control, failure and success often go hand in hand. Success usually comes as a result of past failure. Now, this is actually a philosophy. Failure, there is not a single person here in the world who has not failed. Yet, some of us are ashamed of our failures. Some of us have used that failure as an inspiration to move on. The first time we failed in a subject, the first time we did not get through an interview, does not mean we stopped our efforts. We said, okay, I will not do the same mistakes. They asked me that question. I did not know the answer to that question. Or I did not get this funding for this project. Why did I not get it? Because they asked me if the results were supported by statistics. I did not have it. Embrace failure. In fact, I would say not just embrace failure, celebrate failure. Because you see, failure is the reason that you're going to win at all. If not for this failure, you would not become stronger. Failure is the forerunner of success. So this is not just a moral science lesson. This is something that a leader will have to show to his subordinates that in the process of creativity, you will fail. Now, there is some studies which say that in any creative process, the success rate is less than 10%, which means, amazingly, 90% of the time, people fail. Now, when people fail 90% of the time, they are going to get dejected. They are going to feel low, and they will believe that they are not fit enough to go to the next stage. That is exactly where it becomes important in the creativity process that embracing failure is an integral part. You may fail 90 times. You need to be correct only once. That is the sort of philosophy, that is the sort of policy that must be injected into the followers for them to understand what this whole process is about. Now, what are the steps to embrace failure? Make people see failure not as a measure of self-worth. Every time, the board exam results come out, I am scared. I look at the number of young children who kill themselves, and I blame the teachers for it. Because, right from the first standard, when a student fails, what does a teacher do? Says fail, F, and then underlines the failed mark, and then writes it in red. Again and again, we inject, teachers are culprits here. We inject into our students that they are not good enough. And we do it even in college. We have comparative grading. What are we trying to say? You're not as good as that fellow. Unfortunately, people do not see the difference between the work that they do and the criticism of the individual. This is something that I touched upon in the beginning. Make people see the failure, not as a measure of self-worth. If at all they see failure, it is a failure in the methods. It is not a failure of the individual. This is the primary duty of the leader to ensure that people who have failed do not feel dejected. And we know umpteen number of stories of Robert Bruce or so many other stories of people who failed again and again and again and again. Abraham Lincoln is a perfect example of the number of times he did not lose his self-worth. Continue to focus on what you do well. Sometimes when we fail, we start focusing on what we did not do well, forgetting that we already have a core strength. Don't do that. You can correct that but focus on what you do well. Your core strength, whatever it is, do not dilute it. Do not try to become an all-rounder. Continue to focus on that one thing in which you have already exhibited that you are strong. Also accept limitations. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good to qualify. I'm good to be in the top 10 percentile. I may not be the top, but I'm in the top 10 percentile. That's an accepting of limitations. That says that, yes, see, this accepting of limitations is not a personal statement. It says that, see, for example, I come from a business school. No matter how well we do, we can never compete with the IIM. An Indian Institute of Management is created by an act of law. It is created by a law of parliament. Their funding is different. Their resources are different. The government support is different. And if I'm going to compete with them, I have to accept my limitations and tell them there's nothing wrong. If I am in the first 25, I'm happy. I'm good enough. Provide trustworthy counsel. What is trustworthy counsel? Is when people fail. People don't want to talk about it. You know why people don't want to talk about it? Because they are afraid if they go and tell others about their failure, they will be seen as weak. So they don't want to talk about it. They become more aggressive. They become more unapproachable. Provide trustworthy counsel. Talk to them and tell them, tell me what is your problem? What is bothering you? What can I do for you? How do we overcome this failure together? Don't dwell on failure, but move. Let's be action oriented. The problem with failure is that it is paralyzing. It can frighten you. Sometimes the failure is huge. And at that point of time, you don't know. The very purpose is shaken. The very foundation is shaken. The only way that you can overcome that failure is to keep moving. Move forward is the only way that we can go ahead. Encourage debate is something that we have already touched upon. Let me briefly talk to you about that. Inject as many different perspectives as you can, especially any unusual or extreme perspective that you can find. Now, one way in which you can encourage debate is called the youngest person in the team to talk. You know why the youngest person? Because he has not already been hardened by the system. He is still new to the system. And therefore, he is still not being changed by the system. Call for different perspective. If somebody gives a perspective in a team, tell the others that your perspective cannot be the same. It has to be different. Ensure that each one comes up with at least a small different, slightly different perspective. And that is going to be the discussion, whether it is going to be something as simple as your annual day celebration or change of your syllabus or the way in which you shall connect with the industry or the way that you're going to run your scientific process from now on. Anything. Encourage debate and ask for perspectives which are different. Now, this is an important point I want to talk about for a minute. Isolate specific points of disagreement. There are going to be points of disagreement. In most debate, we want to gloss over these disagreements. We want to bring about harmony. The purpose of debate is not to bring about harmony. We are supposed to have disagreement, but we have got to understand where is the point of disagreement. Is it in the philosophy itself? Is it in the methodology? Is it in the outcome? Is it in the process? Where do we have the disagreement? Because the more clear we are about where does the disagreement happen, then we can analyze it and solve it. For example, if the philosophy itself is a disagreement, then there is no point. But if the methodology is the point of disagreement, you can solve that. The outcome is the disagreement, you can solve that. The way it is to be measured is the disagreement, you can solve that. Push back on people's logic and assertions. In most meetings and most debates, the older you are and the more important positions that you have, people push through with their assertions and they will say, I have known in my years of experience, I know how it is done. And they will give you a logic. I know if we take it up to the top management, they will shoot it down. Push back on that. Do not let them make assumptions Ask for evidence, data, justifications. Say that, okay, these are assumptions. How do I believe that? Where is the evidence that the last time we took this up, the top management shot it down? Where is the data that we should not do this? Or where is the justification that we must do this? When you do this, a debate becomes more meaningful, not just an exchange of words. But if you look at this, we are slowly drawing towards a conclusion. We are drawing slowly towards a particular solution in which not just one individual has been created, but the whole team has joined together in bringing about this thing to a conclusion. When you find people agreeing, invite the sit. Shake the equilibrium. Ask for, put out such questions like, shall we all agree on that? Or do we all agree? Is there any disagreement? Make sure that this debate is not just a waste of time. How do you do that? Don't let a bad or unfinished argument stand. Sometimes the argument becomes very vociferous and people become all heated. And then they say, okay, we'll discuss this tomorrow. Never ever put it off. A bad or unfinished argument must be finished. It cannot be left off for tomorrow, because by tomorrow, people will go home, do some homework and find support for their differing opinions and come back, and the fight will become even more vigorous. Let it finish now. If you are going to run out of time, schedule more time for the meeting, because this debate is the causa proxima for the creative idea. This is the nearest cause for a creative idea. If the debate does not happen properly, the final solution is going to be flawed. Finally, we are moving towards that idea, and that idea will come through. Now, the problem with ideas is that develop a sense of timing. Select the timing for publicly backing an idea. Sometimes when people are tired at the end of the trimester or at the end of a term, don't go talking about an idea that will even more irritate them or which will discourage them even more. For example, at the end of an academic year, you can't go back and tell them, next year, we are going to have a new evaluation system. Don't do that. They're already tired. They're already frustrated with the amount of work that they've put in. So it is the timing of when you are going to announce an idea is very important. But know the allies and resistors of that idea. More importantly, of the person who is proposing the idea. People often accept an idea or oppose an idea not because of the idea, but because of who is proposing the idea. So when an idea is brought about either by the leader or by the followers, even before the idea is presented, the leader has to take into account who are the likely allies and who are the people who are going to resist this. So the more clear you are about this, the better it is for us. Okay. So be aware of this. Establish credibility of idea and proposal. Before the idea is presented, present the proposal. Talk about the credibility of the proposer as to why he or she is credible enough to propose this idea. And talk about the benefits and the unique nature of the idea. This is important. This is called as championing of ideas, because this idea, if not for the leader, will die. If not for the support of the leader, will die. And therefore, this idea has to be championed not by anybody less than the leader. So this, before the idea is presented, you have to increase or create the credibility of the idea and the proposer. Know beforehand what are the arguments that will be placed against the idea. You know who will say. For example, the Indian government is talking about increasing the working hours from 8 hours to 12 hours. You know the simple argument against it is that people will become fatigued. So how do I counter that? How do I counter that? That is a simple thing that you should be prepared before you go presenting an idea. You cannot present an idea and expect people to accept it straight away. You must do some homework before that. You are the one who's going to hold that idea up as a victory cup. Then people will accept it. Okay. Justify the idea. Show what benefits it can bring in. how it will change the process, how it will change the performance, how it will change the outcome, how it will impact the environment, how it will impact the personal lives of people. Justify the idea. When you do that, finally, you have the idea that we have been looking for. But that idea is still an idea. It is still only in our minds. It has to be changed into something that will work. So make these ideas come true. Concretize the idea, the specifics, when, where, how, the dimensions. When will it start? When will it end? If you do it, what would be the benefits? What can you expect? Concretize the idea. Let people know what it means. Make a list of resources needed and keep it in hand. If you don't do this, the idea will remain an idea. And sometimes, because the resources that you want are delayed in arriving, the ideas become diluted and the ideas die out. Suddenly you say, okay, we are starting a lab. Where is the space? Oh, we have to build this new building. Keep it until the new building is there. If the new building is not there, you will settle for a smaller room and the idea has already been diluted. Decide on the purpose of the idea. The spirit is the one thing that will keep the idea alive in the minds of people. The idea is itself a very emotional issue. And that emotional issue is the appeal that keeps people together. So why should people drink Coca-Cola at all? What is the big idea? Because the spirit is that it makes you feel youthful, because it is party time, because there is a meaning of fun attached to it. And that is the reason why you drink something as harmful as a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, isn't it? Decide on the purpose of the idea. Decide what must happen regularly. Now, these are steps that I have already explained in my earlier lecture also, but I am repeating it again. What must happen regularly for this idea to come true? Every week, we must have a meeting. Every week, we must evaluate our performance. Our sales target must not come below this. Our students should not dip in their academic performance below this. Every exam, we must have 90% pass rate, or whatever it is. What must happen regularly? But decide what must happen before it starts moving. This is the first kick. This is the first kick of the football. You can say every 20 minutes we will start scoring a goal. But where does it start? What must happen? Who must kick the ball? From where must the ball be kicked? In what direction must it be kicked? At what velocity should the ball move? What must happen before it starts moving is the first step. Action plan that we need. Be prepared for hurdles and temporary setbacks. Nobody said that this will be a walk in the park. You're going to have difficulty going there, but be prepared for hurdles and temporary setbacks. Okay, this is going to happen, and every idea before it comes true will hit at least one or two hurdles. Keep looking at the larger picture. You know, sometimes we look at the smaller details that we keep forgetting what is the larger picture. And then suddenly when we look up at the larger picture has changed. That is the reason why we need to keep looking at the larger picture, because the larger picture is the context against which this idea has to come true. And if the context has changed, the idea is of no use. If you want to sell ice creams, it must be summer. That is the larger picture. If it has started snowing, yeah, people will still eat ice creams, but not as much. Keep looking at the larger picture. And with that, I come to the end of my lecture. I have overshot by a few minutes, but let me see if you have any questions for me. Thank you very much. It has been a very enjoyable experience for me, and I hope it was the same for you also. So let me stop sharing and go back to taking some questions.
Sir, hello, sir. This is Harishri.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I'm reading the questions for you.
Yes.
The first question is, the leaders in private institutions do not allow the space for the creativity. How should one try to produce a conducive environment?
I have also worked in private institutions, and I'm right now in a private institution in myself. I will not say that your problem is not correct. Yes, you have a point when you say that private institutions, it's very difficult to be creative. But you see, the most beautiful thing about creativity is that creativity comes about exactly when there is adversity. Adversity is the first condition for creativity. So we should take the only thing viewpoint that we need to change is that what we tend to look at as problems, the leaders must learn to look at them as opportunities. And let me give you an everyday example. You get up in the morning and start your scooter, and your scooter doesn't start. We often tend to look at that as a problem. Oh my God, my scooter is not. But if you were to see that as an opportunity to take a walk to your workplace, it changes. It is in the mindset of people that creativity is a mental issue. And therefore, I agree with you. It is very difficult to bring about creative results in private institutions. But I believe that is the most fertile ground. Because if you look at any of the creative ideas that we have today, they have all come about in times of adversity. In times of plenty, people don't think about creativity at all. So I only request that particular professor to look at the problem as an opportunity. And if they were able to do that, I think the solutions will present themselves.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Sir, I'm the same guy who popped up this question. Now,
Yes, sir.
when we when we try to resolve certain type of issues, we are given job threats. And in this pandemic situation, we'll be left with no job at all, having all due responsibilities of our family and being only one earning person. And this has been continuing since many times. So, based on your experience, what would you suggest for people like me?
Yeah, fine. See, creativity is not just the responsibility of the head of the department or the principal or the director alone. When we were talking about leadership, we are referring to all the major stakeholders, the ones who are at the top, the policymakers and others. And if they do not participate in this creation of the groundwork for creativity, I don't understand, Mr. Mihir, how you alone can change this situation. And there is no need for you to risk your job or your livelihood for this. We have to understand that the captain is only as good as the team. And the team includes the owners of the college, the actual correspondents, the directors, and everybody else must also pull in the same direction. So your case is an extremely different one. So I agree with you. Under those circumstances, if they do not desire creativity, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. The next question is how to change the higher officials' wrong attitude. If we mention that they will get angry without realizing, how to tackle those situations?
See, very often we fall in love with our projects. We fall in love with our own ideas and we take it up to the top people. And one, we don't know the timing when we should propose the idea to the top people. Number two, we do not understand what are the priorities of the top people. If the priorities of the top people is just money making, if the priorities of the top people is just about keep the show going, then when you go with a priority that does not fit in there, obviously they will reject it. Therefore, I'm not saying that you should not take any new proposals at all. But the next time you take a proposal to them, the first thing that you may have to do is to step into their shoes. What would you approve if you were in their shoes? And can I clothe my project or my proposal in such a way that it fits in with their agenda? If that is the case, then the chances of this being rejected is relatively less. I'm not saying it will not be rejected at all. I'm saying the chances of it being rejected is relatively less. So I would suggest that you also change when you take up these proposals to the top people.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, can you suggest few pedagogy for promoting creativity in higher education by leadership?
Pedagogy is by itself a wrong terminology that we have been using for a long time. Peda means child. Gogi means learning style. We are all adults, and therefore, rightfully speaking, we should use the word andragogy, which means adult learning style. But for a long time, including top educational experts have been using the word pedagogy. Anyway, that's another thing that you should think about. But the pedagogy that you want, there is no pedagogy, because you see, creativity is not a universal concept. What is creativity for one institution is not the same for another institution. For one institution, moving from, let us say, manual attendance to, let's say, a digital form of it is absolutely, what shall I say, creative for them. To somebody else, it will seem like, what is this? What is the big deal? We have done this 20 years ago. What are you talking about now? And to some of, in colleges, I know there are some colleges in which teachers themselves, my own daughter is a college professor. And the first thing that when she got a job was she bought herself a projector. Because she kept complaining to me saying that I want to use PowerPoint presentation, but my college does not have that facility. I said, instead of complaining about it, find yourself 6,000 or 7,000, buy yourself a projector and take it to the college. The college is happy, but I'm not saying that is the only solution. That is something, we keep thinking of creativity as something out of the world. No, the moment when in advertising, they say, the first creative advertisement was when a toothbrush manufacturer said, these are bristles that spring back. All toothbrushes have bristles that spring back. If you push them to one corner, they will come back to the same position. But you need somebody to say that. And they said that these are bristles that spring back. Likewise, this concept of creativity need not be something out of the world. We are not talking about going to the moon and coming back. This is about improving our processes and outcomes in the workplace. So if you can do something different, it is okay. It is fine. Okay.
Yes, sir. The next question is, can you explain how innovativeness and creativity is different?
Okay. See, innovation and creativity are often used interchangeably, but they are not one and the same. The creativity is the process. Innovation is what happens at the end of it. So, for example, your mobile phone. The mobile phone was simply a mobile phone. And then somebody said, let's put in a camera in it. And they finished off the camera industry. The entire camera industry is gone, except for professional cameras. The amateur camera industry is completely wiped out, because we don't have one camera, two cameras, three cameras. Now you have four cameras in a mobile phone. That is innovation. Now, even in innovation, there are grades of innovation. There is marginal innovation, there is breakthrough innovation, and so on. But the process is the same. Creativity is the process. Innovation is the end result. That is the difference between the two.
Thank you, sir. The one last question is, in
Sure.
practical, we have seen it's very difficult to create an environment of acceptability of 100% creativity in HEIs, because current structural regulation also limits its application. So, do you think having mechanism to rate organization based on creativity can help? So a competitive environment can be created for sustainable practices.
Absolutely. I totally agree with this question. I can understand the amount of importance that must be given to this question. You see, I have always been arguing that even the AICT requirements, the UGC requirements have all been about standardization. And because of that, you can get any grading that you want. A++, A+++. You can get 6, 5, 4 scores and all of that. But if you were to go into these organizations, there's nothing new about them. They're stale, they're old. And you see, even when a teacher is evaluated, I find it very, very demeaning when a teacher is asked, have you published so much? Have you done a project? A teacher is a teacher. A teacher is essentially a teacher. Why are you grading them on everything else except teaching? The classroom performance of the teacher is never evaluated. At best, they will ask for student feedback. And student feedback has to be taken with more than a pinch of salt. So therefore, we have to move away from this paradigm of standardization. And we must bring in new measures of creativity. We must evaluate institutions, people for their creative inputs rather than these standardizations. These standardizations have killed off our Indian education sector. And we are constantly doing it. In fact, we are tightening the screws more and more. As a senior academician, I feel very sad about it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Satyananda, sir.
Satyananda Swen from Bhubaneswar, Gandhi Institute for Technology.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate your statement.
Yes, sir.
Teacher is a teacher.
Yes, sir.
But now NBA, NAC, they make certain points. Now development is 360 degree. So in that teaching and you do all other kinds of things like a school teacher doing food for the students, then elections in the schools, then surveying the required information from time to time. So that is hampering the activities of the teacher and quality of teaching. So how to bring about this?
Hello, Satyanandan sir. Your question is not clear. It seems there is some internet issue from your end. If you don't mind, can you please type the question in chat box?
This is important. And they are asking what you devote time and it is not how to go about this.
I'm sorry, but I could not get the question. Can they help us?
Sir, Satyendranath sir, can you please type the question in chat box so that we will just redirect that question to sir. You can
No
get the
problem.
answer.
He can always address it to me, and I would address him personally because I think the next session time was also.
Yeah.
Sir, I have another small question where it is you have said that teacher should be assessed on its teaching parameter. I strongly agree. But whatever you say, the NAC and NBA, which is very necessary to do it, but is it possible that they should assess on the qualities or creativity that organization is doing, considering their location, their situational analysis, and then you can rate that organization on the basis. I can understand certain parameters may be standardized, but creativity and other resources, how the organization is bringing or gathering is depend on the surrounding situation where that particular institution is located. What is happening? The assessors are coming from a very, very high level of organization, and they expect that the organization which are located in a different location with lot of constraints, still they should perform.
You're right.
It is creating a lot of issues.
Dr. Kirti, I totally agree with you. I have been at the receiving end when certain commissions come there. The commissions are made up of former vice chancellors and whatnot. And they come and tell us, you don't have so much books in your library, you don't do this, that, and that. Agreed. See, that is the problem that I've been saying. We must go from this paradigm of standardization to understanding how does an educational system fit in with the ecosystem in which it is located. For example, there are rural colleges. Now, the important question is that why are you comparing apples with oranges? Their rural college is supposed to serve the rural community. And the important question that needs to be asked is that service being provided? Why are you comparing them with a university in a typical urban society? Because that is not the purpose of the college.
Yeah. I have faced that problem when we were gone for NAG. They asked it how many people are on the BOS. Now we are a university affiliated college. Now everybody cannot be on a BOS.
Absolutely.
So 1 or 2 people will be there. You can find it out how they are contributing in university work in different way. You can give that. So we have given a suggestion and lot of things. Unfortunately, we cleared our NAC, but whatever the grade we expected, we didn't able to get it just because all our faculties were contributing in different way, not only BOS and academic council, because their representation is only 1 or 2%.
Correct.
So even in the NBA, you face the same issue that how many people, we are university affiliated, so we cannot go for the international collaborations. It is not possible financial, as well as that is not going to add any credit to the mark sheet of the student. So why the private institute will go for it? So they should give a marks what other things we are doing it, and we can serve our student better. Because I think all these accreditation processes just to understand that HEI is doing what to satisfy their customer, which are students and the parents and the industry. That is what my point of view.
I agree with you totally, ma'am. The whole idea is that the first thing that, we know in the accreditation process, the first thing they ask for is what is your mission and vision? And I think the entire organization must be seen in terms of accomplishment of that mission or vision. But there is also a mistake that many institutions make. They themselves set themselves very unrealistic missions and vision. And then when it comes to the translation of that into course outcome, mission outcome, or the POs, we find that they fail. I think, some of the misery that is created is partly also because of the institution's ill preparedness for this process. They can keep it simple, but they want to complicate it and pay a price.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a very, very interesting session. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Happy to hear all these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We are ending the session now.
Sure.